senator.
Somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage. But
Well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
Kamala Harris was now to the left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren in the United States Senate. For progressives and Democrat socialists, no one was more outspoken in advancing their agenda.
It is a serious mistake to conflate criminal justice policy with immigration policy, as if they are the same thing. They are not. I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented cross-border as criminals.
Harris was a champion to progressive activist groups supporting citizenship for illegal immigrants. In Senate hearings, she grilled Trump administration Homeland Security officials, even comparing ICE to the KKK.
are you aware that there's a perception that ICE is administering its power in a way that is causing fear and intimidation, particularly among immigrants, and specifically among immigrants coming from Mexico and Central America? Are you aware of that perception?
I do not see a parallel between the power and the authority that ICE has to do its job and the agents and officers who do it professionally and excellently with lots of compassion.
Sir, how can you be the head of an agency and be unaware of how your agency is perceived by certain communities?
There's a lot of perceptions in the media and in the public that are incorrect about the agency.
But the perception exists, would you agree?
In hearings, Harris gained a reputation as a staunch advocate for those in the country illegally, their living conditions and opportunities afforded to them.
I further found out when visiting that detention facility that when those parents are there and perform labor, such as cleaning toilets or doing laundry, they are paid $1 a day. Are you familiar with that policy or practice?
Many of the individuals that are in ICE custody are eligible to apply and work in a voluntary work program. It's not mandatory, it's voluntary if they choose to do so. Many do choose to do so just to pass the time while they're awaiting their hearing or their removal.
Do you think people voluntarily choose to clean toilets to pass their time? Is that what you're saying?
I can say that we have a large number of individuals within our custody that volunteer to work on the work program. Details.
To clean toilets? Sir, is that what you're saying?
Her star rising within the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris took her ambitions to a higher level.
Harris has also been laying the groundwork for a run for the White House. It is great to have you with us on this special holiday. Do you have an announcement you'd like to make?
I am running for president of the United States.
In 2019, Kamala Harris joined a crowded field of over 25 candidates to announce a run for the White House to defeat Donald Trump. Her past record as a prosecutor was made an issue by fellow Democrat Tulsi Gabbard.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. That would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
But Harris had ammunition of her own, bringing up her past as a little girl in the flatlands of Berkeley, California. She landed one of the most talked about jabs at frontrunner Joe Biden on his desegregation and busing policies of the 1970s.
And I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and it was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
The attack worked. Harris shot to the top of the polls amid newfound momentum, and her leftward lurch was reaching new bounds as she positioned herself to be the most liberal choice in the crowded Democratic presidential field.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
Okay, all right.
In a crowded primary with progressive Democrats like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris was aiming to be the choice of hard left Democrats. Many of her policy positions followed suit. In her Medicare for All plan, Harris told CNN's Jake Tapper she would make no distinction between American citizens and illegal immigrants when it came to free health care.
The bill also says, quote, every individual who is a resident of the United States is entitled to benefits for health care services under this act. Not every individual who's a citizen, but every individual who's a resident. So you support giving universal health care, Medicare for all, to people who are in this country illegally?
Let me just be very clear about this. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
And Harris didn't stop there.
She said on immigration, she made this open-ended pledge to end immigrant detention. She said she supported taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She also said she
Taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She actually said she supported that.
She both wrote and answered in the affirmative when she was asked this. And she said she also supported it for federal prisoners.
To some who knew her well, like ex-San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, Harris was moving too far left.
Mayor Brown, Kamala Harris decided early on to be a progressive candidate. She was okay, because she was traveling in the same lane as Warren and Sanders, and they have overcome her and forced her out.
Absolutely, total and complete mistake. You should always be yourself.
To reiterate, you support the Medicare for All bill. I think it's initially co-sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders. You're also a co-sponsor on it. I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
Well, you just played Senator Harris as saying she wants to abolish the insurance industry. That's not correct. That's not American. What's next? What industry are we going to abolish next? The coffee industry?
Harris was forced to back off such radical proposals after listening to voter feedback. At the same time, Vice President Joe Biden's campaign called her a flip-flopper, and Bernie Sanders' campaign said Harris was proposing terrible policy. But Harris was just getting started.
Would you ban offshore drilling? Yes. And I've, again, worked on that. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah, and starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities.
Stemming from her support for the Green New Deal years earlier, Harris continued her support of an agenda to tackle climate change, effectively shutting down America's oil and gas industry and proposing new carbon taxes, not only on businesses, but on consumers.
And there will also be a carbon fee. And that money, a lot of it is going to go to the communities, and this is part of my environmental justice approach to the issue. We're going to do it in a way that is about what we've always done with industry, which is to say that there has to be some connection between the fee and bad behaviors, and there has to be, and that we have to monitor whether it's going to be passed on to consumers. But I'm going to tell you that should never be the reason not to actually put a fee, in particular carbon fee.
While she was winning over many of the left fringes of the Democratic Party, Harris was struggling to attract more mainstream support. The Washington Post wrote, Harris faces an uphill climb amid questions about who she is. And at the Harris campaign, it was unclear who exactly is in charge.
I'm a progressive Democrat. I am a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. I'm not a socialist. I believe that the people in our country today want leaders who understand that right now everyone does not have equal opportunity to success.
2 months before the Iowa caucus, before a single primary vote was cast, Harris dropped out of the 2020 race for president. The New York Times wrote that Harris has proved to be an uneven campaigner who changes her message and tactics to little effect and has a staff torn into factions. When we come back,
Kamala